This is going to be kind of a fast and furious class. It's a lot of the tricks and techniques I've learned over the years using Premiere, little things that you can do to modify your preferences or the interface or keyboard shortcuts that'll help you edit smarter and faster. That should increase your workflow. And it'll be a hodgepodge of stuff. It'll be everything from, different ways you can set up your timeline to preferences you can change and what they actually mean. So I do have keynotes that I'll be jumping back and forth between because, you'll want to remember the keyboard shortcut. We'll ultimately make this available to the people who buy the class as a PDF document. Probably cleaned up a little bit, because what I did is I took actually several of the courses I teach, and I said, I'm going to put them together and create a super course, which is what this is, to get you to the next level really, really fast. So without further ado, let's start talking about preferences. And of course, you're saying preferences, God, could it be any more dull than that? Yes, it could be more dull than that, but hopefully it won't be dull at all. Okay, so this is just an important thing. If you want to reset your preferences, these are important keyboard shortcuts. Why would you want to do that? Well, one reason is your system might keep crashing and you go, well, maybe I have a correct preference. Or you've changed things and you don't know where something went. I suddenly lost one of my windows, or this keyboard shortcut is not working. Every time I hit this keyboard shortcut, it deletes all my clips. So you say, well, I need to reset my keyboard. I need to reset my preferences. So there's two ways to do that. If you hold down the Alt key or the Option key when you launch, it will clean all of your preferences, but it will not throw away any of your caches, and I'll explain what that is. So this is great. You start up the system, just launch Premiere, hold down Option or the Alt key. You will know that you've done that if the following happens. I'm going to go again actually and quit out of my application. We're going to be popping back and forth between the computer and between Premiere, so it's going to drive the people in the booth absolutely crazy. But when you launch Premiere, first thing you see all this stuff loading, and it's just loading from the cache all the plugins you may have put in and any of those additional pieces. Plus, you see all the previous programs you worked on. If you reset your preferences the way you know that your preferences are reset, that will come up as a completely blank slate, so you know you have been successful. I'm going to go ahead and go back into the video that we're working with, and now we're going to be jumping back to the slide. I should have a clicker just because this will drive everybody nuts. They didn't realize in the booth that when they asked for a PowerPoint, I gave them actually a keynote with probably 100 little switches. So if you hear a large crash, that's probably the director throwing something against the wall. Probably a small voodoo doll of me. Okay, but there's another option here. If you hold down Shift Alt or Shift Option when it's launching, it also deletes the plugin cache. So all those third-party elements that you added, and sometimes you'll notice when Premiere is loading, it gets so far and all of a sudden it blows up. Sometimes you might have a corrupt plugin, a third-party plugin, an effect, or a transition. So if you do this, it's going to wipe that out, but the next time you start Premiere, it will take forever to launch if you have a lot of plugins, because it is literally cycling through each one. So be prepared for that. So most of the time, if I'm having a problem, if I just want to make sure everything goes back to scratch, I hold down the Option key or the Alt key. And the reason I started with this, because it is the most fascinating part of this presentation, I know you're all at the edge of your seats, knowing this, it's because I'm about to jump into and talk to you about a lot of the different preferences that you can modify to improve your workflow. So let's jump ahead to the first thing. If you are secretly desiring to know exactly where hidden in your operating system those preferences live, there they are. Again, something you can bring to a party and really impress the people that you're with. I want to show you how some changes you can make to your timeline display to make things more efficient. We are used to using our timeline, and this is what I want to focus on. I'm going to zoom in here. So some basic things. Let me throw some clips into this timeline so we have some elements to work with. I do have this one clip here. I'm going to jump over, just grab some elements, take a look, see what we have that's pretty inside of our video clips. We have some with audio, some pictures. I'm going to just grab a bunch of clips that we'll be working with. I'm going to select them. We'll go with that. We'll go with this. We'll go with this background. So I have these 5 clips ready to bring them into my timeline. I'm going to not just drag them into my timeline. I'm going to bring them in a very, using a special technique. And if you notice down here in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little thing that looks like a stack of papers. That's automate to sequence. This is actually something that's pretty cool. So if I wanted to, I could bring all these clips in, and I go automate to sequence, and it will actually give me options on how I want to bring them into my timeline. So if I have a bunch of photographs, if I have a bunch of video clips, I can say, you know what, bring them into my timeline. I don't need to drag them in one at a time. It will bring them in one of 2 orders. Either the order that I clicked on them, so I'm holding the command key and selecting them, or if I wanted to, I could bring them in the sort order. So if I sort them by length, if I sort them by name, if I sort them by start time, it will use that as the reference. Okay, so I can choose how I want them to be brought in. And the other thing is, do I want to bring them in as an overwrite edit? Do I want to bring them in as an insert edit? Do I want to add transitions? This is really good if you have a bunch of photographs. Let's say you're given 100 photographs, and somebody says, make us a slideshow and put a dissolve in between each one. You can just grab all 100 and drag them in, and it will put them in sequence. Now, you can be even trickier when doing this, because let's say you have a cut of music. And if you have a cut of music, you could go ahead, and I'm going to hit cancel for now because I don't have a cut of music, because we're going to find a cut of music. So I'm going to show you yet another trick. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to look for my music cuts. Search. And I can search for music. Folders with music in it. These are some wonderful music cuts from Creative Live. There we go. I have no idea what this music sounds like. Life is a mystery. I heard there was a song like that. I'll take 2 just in case. Go ahead, bring them in. Bring this full screen. So I got a couple music cuts. Let's see. Let's surprise ourselves. Let's see if we have audio. I'm wondering, is that being heard? No, nowhere. So, as I said, this is going to be a little bit kind of like Fast and Furious, because I love when things will go wrong in this session. Because guess what? Things go wrong in your sessions. You're like, I don't know why this isn't working. So if you're not hearing audio, and this happens a lot in Premiere, of course, the first thing you're going to check is, do you have your audio volume turned up? So I can check to make sure that my volume, but there it is. It's going out, should be going out, I think, to the USB. This one?
I think so, yeah. Let's see if that does it.
And the second thing I want to do is I want to go into Premiere, and this is where people get messed up. They can't hear their audio. You need to go in Preferences, Audio Hardware, and you need to tell Premiere what audio hardware you're going to. So our default output, we want to go into here. And I am betting, if we are lucky, that we should be hearing some audio. So that's the trick. Make sure your audio volume is turned on. And if you don't hear it, check audio hardware and make sure it's being sent to the right output. And you might be thinking, well, I'm not in a studio. It shouldn't happen to me. It can happen if you're switching between headphones and your speakers, or if you have Bluetooth headphones and your speakers. And suddenly it's like going to this Bluetooth that doesn't exist. So that's a really useful thing. So that's one cut of music. Let's take a quick peek at the other cut of music. This is going to be my favorite cut. But actually, this is a good cut to work with. I'm going to grab this cut of music. I'm going to drag it to the timeline. I'm going to kill the clip that's here. So I have this wonderful rhythmic beat, and I'm going to put in markers on the beat. Let's see, I really have a lack of rhythm, but we'll see if it works. So what I did is I put it basically on the beat. Now, probably not the most exciting thing you've seen, but because I've done that with these beats, I can go back and I can select a whole bunch of clips. As a matter of fact, I am just going to randomly select this whole group, but not the music. I'm going to drag them to the little button here, which we saw, and I'm going to say my selection order is fine. I want them to cut in at any of those markers. That's the cut point, okay? And then if I wanted to, I'm going to say ignore audio because I don't care about the sound of those clips, and we're ready to go. I'm going to simply go OK. Switch back to my timeline and check out my edit. Now I know this is mesmerizing, but the point of this is you have a real piece of music. You just sit there and tap to the beat. You throw these clips onto the timeline, and you have the first cut of your edit done. And then you can go ahead and tweak them, but it literally will make a cut wherever there was a marker. Now, when you were watching this, you probably noticed I had a problem with some of this footage, and this is sometimes what you have. I have a timeline that's 1920 by 1080. I threw in footage that was 1920 by 1080. I also threw in footage that was 720p, so it's smaller, and I threw in footage that was 4K, so it was larger. And this happens to people all the time. There also was an instance where I actually threw in a clip that was shorter, and that's why we got that little gap there. So the first thing we should do is fix that gap. There we go. But if we look at our entire sequence, and I'm just going to step through my clips, okay? Up and down arrow will step me through my clips. So this is a 4K clip, and I'm not seeing all of it. This is a 4K clip, and I'm not seeing all of it. And then that's a 720p clip, and I'm not seeing enough of it. So what you can do is you can make an adjustment, and you can do this all at once to save you time. If I select any clip, you're going to be like humming this song in your head for the next, I don't know, 90 minutes. But I can go to any of these clips, and these are 4K, so they're twice the size. If I right-click on them and I hit Set to Frame Size, that clip will now fit perfectly in my frame. It has scaled it down. Okay, so if I look at this, it says it's 50% of its height. It has scaled it down so it fits perfectly. But I have some that are bigger, some that are smaller. They're not even all the same size. So what do? I will simply select all of my clips, right-click. I still have that option to set to frame size. Click. And now, even though they were all different frame sizes, when I go through, look at that. They all fill the screen to their full original size. So it shrunk down anything that was bigger, it enlarged anything that was smaller, and that's a quick way to solve problems. This can happen another way. You may be working in a sequence, and you're working away, and you're working in a 720p timeline, you're throwing your clips in, you're making them fit, and then suddenly you realize you're in a 720p timeline. You fix the sequence, you go back and you change it. So I might be in this sequence here, and I'm going to actually do it for you. I'm going to do the reverse. It's 1080p, then I go, oh my gosh, it needs to be 720. Okay, I don't want to do the export, but I go into sequence, sequence settings, and then I need to change the size of my sequence. So I'm going to change this from 1920 by 1080 to 720p, and 720p is simply 720 by 1280, I believe, but I don't have to do the math. I type in 720 for the smaller number. Hit Tab. Yes, it is 1280. I hit OK. And now it gives me a warning. Something's going to happen. That's bad. And now a lot of these clips don't fit properly. So if I have changed this correctly, some of them might be too big. And well, you know what? I think I might have been saved because they already had a set to sequence tag on them, set to frame size, so they automatically already changed. So that's kind of just a little cool feature. You want to use set. You don't want to use scale. Set is the new one. It actually scales it down. Scale is old. It just makes it 100%, rasterizes, and you lose resolution. We know that you can make individual tracks larger and smaller, and you can do that multiple ways. I can just put my mouse or my trackpad and scroll on any of these, and that will make that track larger. So I'm doing my video track. If I hold down modifier keys, I'm holding down the Shift key when scrolling, and it's making all of my video tracks bigger. I can do the same thing for audio. Hold down the Shift, it makes them all bigger and smaller. But I can do the same thing with keyboard shortcuts. So if I click on a track, so I have this track here, I just want to make sure that it's selected. And if I go Command minus, it makes that smaller, and Command plus makes all my tracks bigger. Okay, Command plus and minus for video. Well, I have an option for an alternate way I can do it. So if I hold down the Option key or the Alt key, did you like the way I did that? An option, an alternate way to do that? I can make my audio tracks bigger and smaller, all at the same time. The other thing I like to do with my track heights is just quickly jump back and forth between a larger size and a smaller size. And so I shift my thinking, and I go Shift plus, and that will make both the video and the audio all larger to a predefined area, and Shift minus, which will make them smaller to a predefined area. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to be covered will be here. So we have this. I'm about to talk to how you can modify your timeline displays. But if we go ahead and jump to the next slide, it's again going to be a variation on this.
I have a quick question about that last thing you did. It's a basic question. Like, what is the actual purpose of making them larger or smaller? Just visibility? Does it show more information? Does it like keep track of where you are?
That actually is a great question. So I keep forgetting everybody's mic'd. I'm always used to repeating the question. So the situation is, why would I even want to do this? What are the advantages? And it's twofold. At first blush, what most people think is, oh, I can see my waveforms for my audio bigger, like that wonderful music, if I make the audio tracks bigger. And let's see if I have that other cut of wonderful music. I know you want to hear the first cut again, but I think this one actually had something more exciting happening here. Go ahead and trim that, bring that down. We're going to show you some trim techniques. So if I really wanted to work with the audio, I could scroll this down and make that bigger. And then if I want to zoom in, I can see quite a bit of detail. So that's what we normally think of making a track bigger for. And the same thing, if I make the video track bigger, and I need to actually zoom out, I can usually see, if I'm zoomed in enough, a little picture icon of the first frame of video. So it gives me some more information. If these things are shorter, I'm going to hit the Shift minus key. I don't see all that information. I can see all my tracks, which give me control, but I can't see everything. And that's why I might want to make something bigger, and it has to be a certain minimum height for me to see my picture icons. Okay? It also has to be a certain minimum height for me to see my waveforms. Okay? But the reason I like this question, because it leads me into some other things you can do with your timeline to make it more useful. And you noticed in that slide I showed you that there was a drop-down menu. We don't have to go back to the slide. We're going to go to the real thing. Do you see this wrench right here? This wrench is going to allow me to modify how the timeline display is displayed. So if I click on that, I can choose what I want to see, or in some cases, what I don't want to see. So if I'm not working with needing the audio waveforms and I find it a distraction, I can go ahead and I can turn off audio waveforms. Or one thing I do like to turn off is there is your opacity keyframes, which is sometimes on in the video. So I'm going to go ahead and say video keyframes. So a lot of times this is on by default, this line here. And I don't know if this has happened to any of the hundreds of thousands of people who are actually tuning in right now, but it's likely that you go to move a clip, and when you grab that clip, you grab this line here, and instead of moving the clip, you move the line, not realizing it, and what you've just done is turn down the opacity on this clip. And now you're going, why is this clip black? And you don't know why, because you didn't remember doing it because you grabbed that line by accident. And this is normally on by default. So if you want to avoid that, you can go here under the wrench and say, do not show my video keyframes. I don't need them now. And that way I won't accidentally use them. Let's take a look at some of the other options, some of the other things that we can do down here that I like. Okay. So this basically is turning on everything we want to see or we don't want to see. And the other cool thing that you can do here is if you want to, you can set this up that track 1 is really big so you can see your thumbnails, but maybe you want tracks 2, 3, and 4 of your video to be small. And maybe you want the same thing with your audio. Maybe you want tracks 1 and 2 to be large so you can see your waveform. So you can set all that up, and you can save it as a preset so you don't have to go readjusting things over and over again. So if I wanted this to be big, and I wanted this to be small, and I wanted this to be small, so now I'm creating, a specific look and feel, I can go ahead and I can save this as a preset, and I'll call this Abba's Fine Cut, and I can say, you know what? I'm going to even give it a keyboard shortcut. I haven't assigned it yet, but I'm going to say when I do assign it, it's going to get track height 1. Okay, I hit OK. So now let's say I'm working through, I'm zooming in and out there, and I'm zooming down there. All I have to do is go to my wrench, now that I've created it, and you'll see there's Abba's Fine Cut. I was trying to zoom in there and I missed it. There we go. I click on that, and it goes to the exact height layout that I like. I assigned it a potential keyboard shortcut. So if I wanted to make it a real keyboard shortcut, I need to go into my keyboard shortcut preferences. On a Mac, it's underneath where we have Premiere Pro. It would be under File if you're on a Windows machine. So I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to do Keyboard Shortcuts. And what I want to do is, this is Track Height Preset, and I will type in, I'm pretty sure it's called Track Height Preset. There it is, Track Height Preset 1. I said Track Height Preset 1 was what I like. That's Abba's layout. I'm going to go ahead and give this a keyboard shortcut. To give it a keyboard shortcut, I just click under Shortcut, and I need to pick a keyboard shortcut that's empty. Well, these are all the ones that are used without a modifier key. If I hold down a modifier, like the Shift key, I can see which ones are being used. So maybe just for grins, I'll go Shift, period. Okay? That's not being used, so we'll go down here, Shift, period. We're going to accept that. Okay. Now, when I'm working in my sequence, I'm editing away, and I'm ready to do my fine cutting, and this is all discombobulated, I simply go Shift, period, and I have the layout that I saved, the layout that I like. So being able to do that very quickly is very, very useful. Let's take this to another level. There's another reason why I like to have my tracks much higher than the default. And I'm going to cheat here and give myself a little more real estate. You can go ahead and you can, of course, change the layout of your workspace. And if you do change it and you like it, you can save it by going to Workspace and Save as a new workspace, but we're not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and make my audio really tall, and I'm going to make my video really tall. And we're going to zoom in, and I'm going to show you some really cool things. First of all, if you make it tall enough, you can see the second track where it says audio 1. Not very useful for me. What I really would like to do is have that named narration or voiceover, and then one named music, and one named sound effects, okay? So if I right-click on that, I can rename that track, and I can call this narration, even though I have music on the track. And I could go down to the next one, audio 2, and I could click on that, right-click, and I could say, rename, music. So now, when I look at this, it's not just audio 1. I know I put all my music on this track. I put all my sound effects on this track. I put all my voice on tape on a certain track. And I can see it. But here's the problem. I make this nice and small. I lose that information. Life can be so challenging. So I'm going to make it big again. I'm going to show you a cool little area. I want to modify how this is organized. And you see there's a bunch of different things. There's sync locking, and I can mute a track. So if I hit this, by the way, and you play, you don't hear the track. I can solo the track. So if I click on this, it mutes all the other tracks. It's a great way to isolate something. If I want to record something, I can make this the voiceover track, so I can record this. So this is all there on my first track. And maybe I use this a lot, maybe I don't. And then if I really make it big, I can actually show my keyframes and jump to them. But if I go up here under that wrench that we had, and at the very bottom I say Customize Audio Headers, I will get this great little layout where I can customize my audio layers. Well, first of all, you know what? I want my narration to be up here. So I'm going to go where it says track name, and I'm going to put that on the first row. Okay, it disappeared from that third row. You know, I don't use track locks much, so I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of that. And I want some other things here. I want to be able to see some of my meters, okay? I want to see the volume of that track. So maybe that'll be useful for me on the second layer. And maybe I also want to see, and you get little pop-ups, by the way. Let's see if I can bring this over here. A meter for that. And then I could do stereo panning for left and right balance. So I'm putting that on the third track. And I'm not doing a lot of voiceover recording. I want that to be on the third track. And let's just go ahead and put on the fourth area my track sync. And there's a whole bunch of things here, but I think I pretty much used everything. Okay? So now I've done that. I hit OK. And take a look at what happens when I make this as small as possible. I'm hitting the Shift- key. Now, because of the track name being not on the second, but on the first row, even when this is fully reduced, I can go ahead and say, narration, music, audio. Becomes much more valuable to me than the original layout. And if I go ahead and I make this track wider, again, I'm just rolling it, you'll see I have some other cool things on here. Because I added a track meter, and I added panning. And I also added a track volume option. So if I go ahead and hit play, let me see if I can jump my playhead back to the beginning. To jump your playhead back to the beginning, the home key or the end key on an extended keyboard. If you're working on a laptop, left and right arrow generally moves you back and forth a frame, but if you hit the function key and the left arrow, it'll move you to the beginning of your sequence. And if you hold the function key and the right arrow, it'll move you to the end of your sequence. So I'm going to hit function, left arrow, it's at the beginning, and I'm going to hit play. As soon as we start hearing the music, I have meters. I can see the meters for this track. So that's pretty cool. And if I right-click on that little teeny meter thing, I can even control, now I've made some changes already of not just seeing, like normally this is your default. Normally it's a gradient. Normally you don't see the valleys. And normally you do not see dynamic peaks. So this is normally how you see your meters, which is nice. And by the way, it's just fully reflected on the same meters over here. But I like to get more information from my meters. So I will right-click on it, and I will say, show me my static peaks, which means it's going to hold for a second so I can see how loud individual parts of that music are getting. If I wanted to show valleys, it shows me where it gets the quietest. But I definitely want to switch from gradient, which is nice, to really specifics, and I can see the parts that are good, that are warning in yellow, and if it gets too loud, it'll go into the red. And because I've changed it there, it will also change. I'll make this a little bit bigger. There. So this isn't a gradient, and it's telling me that I'm peaking, and I can very quickly know, yeah, I'm hitting about -3, but I'm not overmodulating. So that's very, very useful to me, and those are some of the changes I make and some of the advantages now of making a track higher other than just seeing the waveform. It's giving you a lot of information. While we're down here, let me point out a couple of other things. I added a panning option here, and at first blush, people might go, oh yeah, you click on it and you drag it over and you try to get it to work. That's not what it's all about. You'll never want to do panning that way. But if you want to go to the left or the right track, it's really easy. You simply click on the L or the R, and it immediately pans that track to the left or the right. And it's nice having that button on your timeline. No, I would not necessarily. I would do my panning probably in the audio mixer. But to have this here and say, oh, you know something? I just want this to come out of the right track. I just want this to come out of the left track. It's pretty good. The other thing that you see here is a track volume virtual slider. And people may go, okay, I put in a bunch of keyframes. I'm keyframing my audio. This is something we covered in the basic classes. But basically, I'm just, by the way, to do a keyframe, just holding down the Command key or the Control key on Windows, adding little keyframes, and then I say, oh, look, my music's going to get louder there, and it's going to get quiet here. And I'm going to go ahead, and I'm going to hit play. Function left arrow. You know what? We have some dead music at the beginning here. Let's get rid of that. Didn't do that the proper way, but I will show you the right way of doing it. Okay. Okay, so I think I keyframed where there was nothing. So, and then I deleted it. So let me go ahead, put some new keyframes in, boom, 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 boom. Bring this up, and I know, again, very exciting music. There we go. It goes down, it goes up. If we listen to this, really soft, really loud. And I go ahead and I grab this slider and I say, you know what? Notch it up 6 dB. And I look at my keyframes. Nothing's happened. The music's gotten louder. What I want to point out is that in Premiere, you have 2 sets of audio controls for your track. You have the clip keyframing, which is what you saw me do. And you also have track keyframing. So right now, I'm looking at the clip, and I'm bringing it up and down. And this is how we normally bring audio levels up and down. You can do very similar things, though not as many, with the video side to add elements. So again, if you go here to the wrench, customize the video header. Again, you have these options, and they're kind of all in place. But again, I might move my video to the top track, and I might move my sync lock to a lower track, probably even to the bottom track. And now, when I go ahead and I close this track, might need to let it refresh. It didn't take it. Now you see video 1, 2, and 3. And again, you can go back and rename that so you can have video 1 being interviews, video 2. You can rename that track to be titles, probably that would be B-roll, video track 3. Again, rename that, and that could be B-roll or whatever. And now it's a lot more useful. So that's one of the cool things when you go under the wrench and how you can modify things. When you make a new sequence, you simply go File, New, or Command-N, and you get this dialog box that probably everybody is familiar with. You've finally figured out what the best default sequence is for you. If you haven't, I recommend using DSLR, 1080p 30, 24, or 25, depending on if you're in a PAL or NTSC country. But what you don't do is you often don't go to these other tabs. And if you go to the Settings tabs, that actually is the size and everything you want to. But under Tracks, you can, when making a new sequence, actually name your audio tracks in advance. So I could say track 1's always narration, track 2 is always voice on camera, track 3 is always music, track 4 is always ambience. And I can even say if it's a mono track, maybe anytime I put anything on track 1 or 2, I want it to be mono. So if somebody recorded it in stereo with a stereo mic on the camera, I want to make sure that it comes out dead center. I just make it a mono track. So whenever I put things on that track, it always comes out of the center speaker. There I can also control panning. But this is the nice thing. Once I make these changes, and I can say, I want so many audio tracks. Let me add an audio track, and I rename them. And I say, I want to start. I always like to have 4 video tracks. Okay? Once I do all of this, I can save this as a preset. I can call it ABBA's preferred track. And now, when I make a new sequence, I choose ABBA's preferred layout, and it will create a new sequence with all the specs that I like, and the tracks will already be renamed the way I like to rename them. And as a matter of fact, sometimes I like it when I open my new sequence, is that I like the audio track 1 to be expanded. I don't want to have to manually do it. I click this button that says open, so when I launch that new sequence, that track is already expanded. So that's some of the controls you have that we tend not to look at when we're working with Premiere, and that can make things a lot more efficient in your timeline. I'm going to go ahead and we'll hit cancel for that because I don't need a new track. I've been speaking quickly. I'm curious if anybody has written in any questions or if we have any questions from the audience.
Yeah, there's one that came in a few minutes ago. Is there a way to lock a clip in place on the timeline without locking the whole track? So this person says, trying to keep many tracks of music video in sync without having 40 tracks. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. So the question is, can I lock it so that I can't accidentally move it? You generally can only lock a track. So their current workflow is probably the only workflow, which is, I put this cut of music on a track and I lock it. Now, there is the possibility that they might be building, if they're building some sort of an audio bed that they want to keep locked. What I would do, and I would have a bunch of audio tracks here. Let me throw in that second cut of music. We'll throw that in there. We'll duplicate it again, maybe just to have the implication of more tracks. I may take all of these, and I should be able to do this. Sometimes I remember I can do it, and then I realize that's a different application that I'm working in. But I should be able to select all of this audio, right-click, and I should be able to, no, I can't nest it. I thought I could actually could group these into a nest. Let's see if I merge them, what happens. No, it doesn't let me do that. So there's no way to do that. I'm trying to think. The only other options that they might have, and I don't think this necessarily solves their problem, is we have these tracks here, but what a lot of people don't realize is that you can create a submix track. And so if you have a lot of individual tracks, maybe individual tracks of ambience, you can create a submix. You can go, I'm going to go say add tracks, and I'm going to go over here and call this a submix track. I'm just going to add one. I don't want to add any other audio tracks. And by the way, this is a great little thing. I just did add tracks. If you want to add tracks before or after, you can just put it exactly where you want it to be. You don't have to move things up and down. If you say, oh no, I forgot to put in a second track that I want for the interviewer's questions, you could do that. But I don't want any of these for now. I just want the submix. I can choose what kind of track it is, and I'm going to say OK. And you'll notice here that I now have a track called submix. And what I can do is I can say I want tracks 1, 2, and 3 to go into that submix, and then I can pot it up or down as a group. And to do that, you would go into some of your audio editing workspaces. And what this opens up is your audio track mixer. So let me get the right mixer here. Here we go, audio track mixer. And if we look at this closely, I'm going to bring this full screen by hitting the tilde key. One of these little guys should be my submix. Oh, there it is. Submix is down there. It's this track here. So I can send, this is actually, should be called submix, master. I can send any track I want to that submix. Okay, so all of these 3 are going to this one, which is the submix, and I can control those 3 tracks' audio levels or panning all at once. And you can have multiple submixes, and you can actually put submixes inside of other submixes. So this is the most powerful audio mixing tool I've ever seen in a video editing application. But it is incredibly powerful. You can add effects to it, any kind of notch filters and equalizers and whatnot. So it's pretty powerful. But as to the original question, what you would need to do is you would need to lock tracks. And for those people who aren't familiar with that, if I hit this little lock button, I can no longer accidentally move any of these elements. That's what that little hash is. But I can still move these other ones. Now, every technique always has a little trick to it. So if I wanted to, if I hold down the Shift key, I can lock all my tracks at once. Okay? So maybe you just want to move the one track and he doesn't want to go through and lock the other 39. So Shift will turn them all on and off. If I want to turn them all on, I hold Shift, I lock them all, and then I click on the one that I don't want to be locked. So now, when I work with this, I can only affect this track. Every single one of my other tracks is locked. That could possibly be very helpful in reference to his question and to other people's questions, being able to lock tracks. You can do the same thing with video. Again, you can lock a video track so you don't accidentally move it. The Shift key just lets you select everything, and then you can just turn on or off the one that you want. So those are very, very useful. And by the way, that Shift works in other instances too. So if I wanted to make sure all of my target tracks are selected, I can hold the Shift key, turning them all on and off, and also source and destination tracks. So you don't have to sit there and step through. You can hold down the Shift key, and you can be in good shape. I do want to point out for some folks that may not be as familiar with this, I'm going to go ahead and get back to the editing tool, and let's make our tracks a little bit larger, that sometimes you'll notice that you have source selection available, and sometimes you don't. And some of the material I'm covering here has been covered in the other classes, but my assumption is not everybody has watched all the other classes. So right now, I only see the audio source as being available. And that's because the clip that's currently was loaded in my viewer, and let's go ahead and reset this back to our traditional layout, was an audio clip with only one channel. But if I load a clip in that has more than one audio track, so I loaded this interview, and I think this is just a mono track, yeah? It's a stereo track, but it still is going to go to track 1. That will be lit up. If I open something that has more audio tracks, and let's see if I have one in here. I may or may not. I don't think I do. You would actually see all the audio tracks. So if you have something that's like 8 tracks of audio, you would see all of those in your sources and be able to target them. Same thing for video, and I'm going to show you an example. I'm going to show you actually I'm going to cheat here and just see if I have anything with more than 2 or 4 tracks. You can go here into the list, metadata display, project management. I always like to see media type, but let's see if I can see audio usage. No, 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 no. I probably do have my tracks here, but it will I can set it up to show me what the audio tracks. Here we go. This would tell me right there. 24-bit, 4 mono. So this clip here does have 4 tracks of audio to it. So if I double click on this one to open it up, you will see here that I have the potential for 4 tracks of audio to bring it in. So this will reflect whatever is loaded into your source monitor. If there's no audio to a clip, it'll just show the video, okay? If there's multiple video, and that can happen in a couple of instances, you bring in a Photoshop document. And I bet I have one buried in here. Here we go. You guys will love this. This is a Photoshop document of me that I brought in layers. Yeah, like that? So if I go ahead and I load this into my source monitor, and I look at this, you'll see that I actually have 3 target tracks in my video because there's 3 layers in this. Now, normally I'd bring them all in, but if I choose to, maybe I don't want to bring in the at Abba Shapiro, I could turn that off, and when I go ahead and edit this in, it's only going to bring in the top 2 tracks. So that's how you control that. This is, by the way, just to get your head wrapped around it, if you're relatively new to this, this is your source. So this is saying what elements of the original clip am I putting in, and then I'm saying this is my target, where do I want it to go? So track targeting is pretty key, and I'm going to do this using something much less complex than my face. We'll do it with a single video track. So we'll go here. Actually, I'm even going to do a still. So I have this still image. I have this bottle of wine. It's always good to have a bottle of wine on Friday afternoon. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw it right there on my timeline. I want it to land there. I'm very specific. What do I need to do? I need to mark an endpoint. I'm just telling it where to go. I never get lost. People are always telling me where to go. There's a rim shot happening somewhere in the world. So there's my endpoint, but I don't want the wine glass to go onto track V1. I want it to go onto V2 or V3. I'm going to go onto V2 here. I'll go ahead and do my Shift plus, get everything the same size. That's my target area. So if I go ahead, I mean, normally we'd go, I don't know how to get it there. I'll just drag it to the second layer. You target the second layer there. And now if I use my overwrite or insert key, overwrite being the period, insert being the comma. Think of the insert, the comma as wedging it in between. Overwrite, it'll put it exactly where I want it, on track 2 where my playhead is parked. And that's how I target my tracks. I'm going here to my target track. And that is what it did. Yes, it went exactly where I wanted it to be. So that's how I can choose where to target things. If you happen to have multiple tracks turned on for your targeting, and there's only one source track, it'll go to the lowest active track. So that's how this works. That's how you can target your audio. So perhaps, you know, you're putting in a bunch of music, and instead of having to drag it into tracks 3 and 4, you just turn off tracks 1 and 2 for targeting, and every time you do an overwrite or an insert edit, it goes exactly where you want it to be. So being able to take control of your timeline is pretty powerful. There's a lot of things you can turn on and turn off, and there's some key things here that you should be aware of. A lot of times, you know, if we don't know what it does, we just ignore what an icon does. And sometimes you could discover, oh, this could be really, really valuable. So I do want to talk about these. This is probably the most valuable one. It looks like a magnet. It is snapping. And snapping can be turned on with the S key and turned off with the S key. So sometimes we actually do it by accident. And look at that. I still have a track that's locked. Let me go ahead and don't know how I did that. But when you bring 2 clips close to each other and snapping is turned off, you can just, like, you know, you can overwrite each other, you can leave little gaps. But if you turn it on, when you bring 2 clips close to each other, as soon as they get close enough, like a magnet, they'll snap together, and that way you won't have any kind of a flash frame or a gap. That's the whole purpose of snapping. Things will close. So then I'm saying, that's great, and I want it to snap to my timeline. And some of you may have discovered it doesn't do that. For a long time, and they may have switched this, or I may have switched this, you need to go into your preferences under General, and in there is an option to snap to your timeline. Now, while we are in here, I know a lot of folks have been using Premiere now for a few years, and they're used to, under the General tab, find all the things such as snapping to timeline, what's the duration of my transitions going to be for both audio and video. That all has been moved in the most recent build down to its own section called Timeline. So let's go ahead and jump over to there to Timeline. And this is really pretty useful. This, by the way, is where you can change the default duration of your video and audio transitions. And by the way, you can do that with seconds, or you can do that with frames. So if you're jumping around to different frame rates for different sequences, a half second is always a half second, but if you do frames, 12 frames is whatever 12 frames is, and if you're in a 60 frame sequence, it's going to be a quarter of a second, actually a little bit less. Still image duration, while we're in here, is the duration of any time you bring in a still image, a photograph or a graphic. It will default to a duration of 5 seconds. So when you throw it onto your timeline, if you're not doing a 3-point edit, it'll be 5 seconds long. And you're probably aware that you can stretch it longer, you can make it shorter, but sometimes you may be doing a slideshow and you know you want 10 seconds for every single one of your images. So you set your still image default duration to 10 seconds, and then you import your still images. If you make this change, it will not affect any images or graphics that you've already imported. Okay? So this is from the moment that you import something new. But now let's go back down to some of these areas. So snap playhead in timeline when snap is enabled. So that's something that I like to have turned on. If it's not turned on, actually, so if you're going to go to a marker, or you're going to bring the playhead to the end of the clip, let me show you actually how that doesn't work, and then once we change it, how it does work. So I'm bringing the playhead here, and it doesn't really snap to the end of the clip. I don't necessarily have that precision, but if I go back, and let's see if I remember the keyboard shortcut, Command, comma. Yes, that's the keyboard shortcut to get to your preferences. And I believe it's the same on a Mac and a PC. But if I go to my timeline, zoom in so you can see this a little bit better, I'm going to say snap playhead in timeline when snap is enabled, so the magnet has to be turned on. Go ahead, hit OK. Now, when I drag this over, boom. It's like a magnet, and I'm right there to the end of the clip. And I generally like that turned on. If I'm doing something where I don't want it to snap, yes, I could go into the preferences, or I could temporarily turn off snapping completely by hitting the S key and turning that magnet off. And then I don't have to worry about that situation. So that's some of the snapping and some of the preference changes. Now, while we're up here, I said there were a couple other things that we looked at the wrench. Okay? There's also the ability to add markers. And markers are really useful in many aspects of editing. We saw me use markers at the very beginning of this session when I put markers on the timeline, and I used them as a reference to cut my music to. And that's a very useful thing, and we did automate the sequence. But you can use markers for a lot of things, and you can put markers on your timeline, or you can put them within the body of a clip. So if I go over here and I click on that, it puts a little marker here. And if I double click on that, I can actually change the name of the marker. I can change the color of the marker. There's different types of markers. Mostly I use comment markers. But if you're exporting out something to a DVD or even to a QuickTime movie, you can put markers in, and they can be chapter stops. So if you're playing that movie in QuickTime, literally you'll have a little drop down. You may have seen this on some movies that you've played for your YouTube or Vimeo, where they can jump immediately to different chapters. And that would be a chapter marker. And when you export it, you say, keep an eye out for chapter markers. And they have other things where, like if you're going out to Flash files, you can do web links, hot links. But for right now, we're going to use them as comment markers or just generic markers. So sometimes I don't even need to give them a name if I want to use them for something else. So I could click on that, but I'm not all about moving my mouse back and forth. If I want to make a marker, I hit the M key. It makes a marker. If I hit the M key twice, it opens up the dialog box, and I can write something in. So I can say, at this point, can't look any better. Modest comment. Okay, so I now have a marker here, and if I go to my markers list, I should be able to see my markers on my sequence. There we go, just had to catch up. There it is. Can't look any better, and I can find exactly where that marker is if I need to do things and change colors. So being able to use markers to write notes to yourself of things you want to change, very, very useful, and you can jump to different markers by simply clicking on them and finding them, so you have a whole marker list. Again, very useful, but I sometimes can use markers for other situations. Maybe at this point in my sequence, okay, I want something to happen. As a matter of fact, maybe I'm timing that at this, right now, this beat of music right there, I want to be able to have something happen on the clip. So I hit M with the clip selected, and you'll notice that marker is right there. Now I find all of this waveform and stuff a distraction. Luckily, I was paying attention to myself at the beginning. I'm going to turn off audio keyframes. I'm going to turn off waveforms. Look how clean that is. I don't need to worry about that. So I have a marker there, and right at that beat of music, I want to make sure that a certain event happens. Okay? I can go over here. I have this boat. Very short clip of the boat. I'm going to mute this. So I want the boat, when it's right there, to line up. I put another marker. And all I have to do now is line up these two markers, and my event's going to happen at the same time as the beat of music. Now that's pretty cool. But I did something horrible just now, didn't I? I just kind of screwed up my timeline. I want the event to happen at that moment, but I don't want to step on my other clips. Let's zoom in a second. By the way, zooming in is simply the plus key and the minus key on your keyboard. And I'm going to bring this, let's go ahead and bring this full frame. So I'm going to undo that. I want this to line up with that. Actually, I want this to line up with that. Really, I just want to change the timing of the in and out point of that clip. What I really want to do, and let me see if I can zoom back out a little bit, is I'd love to take this clip, bring it up to this level, slide it over. Let me bring my playhead there. Snap this to the playhead. Say, OK, that's perfect. It's happening at the right time. Is there enough media on this clip? I'm probably getting myself in trouble. This is what happens when you don't pay attention to yourself. I don't think I have any extra media on that clip. No media in this clip, so you think I'd give up? Never give up, never surrender. I bet I can make this clip longer if I slowed it down a little bit. I'm going to cheat. I'm like, look at the shiny object here while I figure out a solution over here. And I get to teach you something else new. I want to change the duration of this clip. Click on that. It's right now at normal speed. It's normal speed, it's 6 seconds long. Let's make it 50% normal speed. See if that works. Much longer clip. See if I have enough. Not long enough yet. I'm not giving up. I'll make it lower. It's a boat. Nobody cares how fast or how slow it's going. Let's make it 30%. Okay, we have lots of. So I would line it up. I would trim it down. I would trim it down. I would then drag it and bring it in, right? I just achieved my objective, cheating along the way. But you don't have to do it that way. I'm going to go ahead and undo that slide. I'm going to keep it slow so I have enough media. But let's say that's there and it's actually inside. So I put my marker in. I have plenty of handles. And by the way, if you want to move something up and down from one track to the other, you don't have to drag it. Okay? Oops. Luckily, I'm not a doctor. Oh, I didn't mean to leave that scalpel there. If you hold the Option key and the up and down arrows, you can actually move any selected clip to a different track. So I'll move it back down. So what I really want to do here is I want this marker to line up with the now well hidden with the tooltip marker that's down there. To do that, I want to do something called a slip edit. Okay? I want to slip the in and out points simultaneously for this clip. I want to technically do this. Let me zoom in here so we can see. By the way, how many people out there, and I can see you all over the planet, use the keyboard shortcut for the zoom? I see one person using a flipper, so we have the dolphin community watching. Because you think it's really stupid. You can just use the plus and minus keys, right? Okay, there is a reason to use it. If I want to zoom in to say just these 3 clips, I hit the Z key, I'm in the zoom tool, I select those 3 clips. Now I'm working with specifically that range. So there is a reason to want to use the keyboard shortcut Z or Z. All the Canadians are going, we don't have a Z key. The Australians are going, we know. Okay, if you haven't noticed, I'm a little random. Could be worse. You could be my children who grew up with sarcasm from the age of 0. But I want to go ahead and I want to move this. So I'm going to double click and load this into my viewer. And technically, what I want to do here is I want to move the in and out points so that this is kind of over here. I want to basically grab this and do what's called a slip edit, move the in and out points at the same time. And it's very easy to do a slip edit, as long as you grab the middle, when you load a clip from the timeline back in the viewer, but it's not really helping me line up my marker. I really want to do the slip edit inside of my sequence. And I can do that. I need to switch to the slip edit tool. And we have all of these tool tips. So some of them are hidden. And so if we hover over our tools, there's your regular tool, your selection tool, your default, the V, it looks like an arrow. But you'll notice that some of these, and let's really zoom in, have little arrows there. And that's an indication that if I click and hold, there are additional tools underneath that I can choose. So there's trim edit tools. We talked about this in some of the other classes. I might bring this in if we have time today. So I have ripple edit, roll edit, and stretch edit. But I want to do a slip edit. And if I go down here, this is the slip tool. It's the Y key. And underneath that is the slide tool. But what I want to do is a slip edit in the timeline. So I hit the Y key, or I select that. I go over to my timeline, make sure I have the Y key, that I really did select it. Sometimes I like, just for grins, to have that there so I have a nice target to hit. So, slip tool, I want to get that over there. I simply click and drag. You'll see, this is where it's good to have 17 fingers. As I do a slip, it's hard to see actually a little bit, but if you notice, ironically, the upper left and right is the end of the first clip, beginning of the last clip, and the bottom part is the beginning and end of the middle clip. They happen to all be based upon the same scene because I did that automate to sequence, but I can go ahead and I can start slipping this, and if you noticed, there, my little marker snapped right to where this other marker in my playhead was. So what I did seemingly like an hour ago by bringing something up, moving it over, trimming it, bringing it down, you can simply do really quickly, and I'll do it in another instance. Oh, I sure do have a lot of that Shanghai footage. Okay, so let's say I want to do it here. How did I manage to lock my tracks? Probably held down that shift key. Okay, so maybe I have the dancer here, the V key. Do it very quickly, so not a lot of movement. Okay, I want this point. It's not very dramatic. If I go hit the marker without a clip selected, it just puts it on the sequence. I don't want that. Want the clip selected. So that's the point I want the action to happen. Here in my sequence, that's where the beat of music is. And probably I could see it if it wasn't so small. Green on green. This is good. Sure, there's a marker here. It says there's a marker there. Just can't see it, but let's imagine there is. Slip tool, Y key. Let's go ahead and make sure this is snapped to the marker. There it is. And bring that across. You like this? It worked perfectly without a net, so I'm going to do this again. Oh yeah, I just remembered. It worked for me last time because I just put entire chunks of clips in, and I had to extend that clip. So really, you need some handles. So I apologize for that in my haste. But using markers to line things up, especially actions to music, if you want something to happen when a person is saying something very specific in a narration, you can put a marker in the narration. You put a marker in the, on the action, and you just line up those markers. If you need to, you can do it with the slip edit tool. So I want to show you the slide just because it's in the family of the slip slide tool, and I need to make sure. And if you notice, this is where it caught me. I put entire clips here in my timeline. If you see these little triangles, that means you've used, the whole end of that clip. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of a trim here. Okay, and let me do a little trim here so I just have some media to work with. Okay, so now I know there's plenty of room. So a slip edit, remember why? I can change what is happening in this middle clip. The duration of the 3 clips don't change, but what happens in the middle, the start and end point does. The slide tool, which is the U key, is very similar. Again, the duration of the 3 clips don't change, but maybe I want the action of the middle clip to happen earlier or later. Maybe it's a reaction shot of somebody yawning or going, and I want it to happen earlier or later, but I love the length. Hit the U key. I can move it to the left. This gets shorter, this gets longer. So I can move the position of the middle clip. The in and out points don't change, but when the event occurs, does. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you can see on the bottom, that's the in and out points of the clip before and after. And then the clip that's not changing in the middle is on the top 2. So we're back in the timeline, and I just want to make sure everybody understands how to navigate through the timeline, and that many of you, might still be using these buttons here. They're called transport controls to play, fast forward, rewind, put your markers in. If you are doing that, you shouldn't do that because you should be using the keyboard. So we're going to start with basic keyboard control. So take your right hand. I'm looking all over. Everybody have the right hand up. Put your thumb on the space bar, on your virtual space bar if you don't have a computer in front of you, and then that space bar is just play and stop. These 3 fingers will naturally fall on J, K, and L. And very conveniently, J, K, and L allows me to play forward by pressing the L key. J will allow me to play backwards. If I tap it multiple times, I can rewind fast by multiple taps on the J key, multiple taps on the L key, allow me to fast forward. So I don't have to go ahead and grab the playhead and move it back and forth. The K key is a stop or pause button when I'm playing. But if I hold down the K key and I press L, it will move me forward a frame at a time every time I tap it. And if I hold down K and L simultaneously, I will move forward in slow motion. So I can be very precise. And the same thing for a rewind. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to just get to a different clip because he's looking back and forth. So I'm going to fast rewind. There we go. Get a static clip. This is really good to do on still photographs to show this example. So hold down the K key, tap J. I'm going backwards a frame at a time. Hold down the K and the J, slow motion. So now I want to mark a clip. I'm in my timeline, but let's go ahead and load a clip into our viewer. Actually, let's go ahead and use the dancer. And so I could scrub back and forth here, but I'm going to use my J, K, and L. So I want to go ahead, and I want to start right there in this initial pose. I want this to be an in point, and right above J, K, and L is the I key, which is your in point keyboard shortcut. So I press the I key, and now I have the in point marked. I can hit play with the space bar. I can be very precise. I wait until we get right there, lift the leg, and out. So I hit the O key. J, K, L, I, and O. I have already marked my clip exactly where I want, and I'm ready to insert this clip into my sequence. Now, my playhead is parked in kind of a random area, so I do want to go ahead and switch over to my timeline. I have left my mouse at home, and I can't find the trackpad on my laptop. That's a problem. But I want to be able to switch between my windows. How many times have you wanted to switch between your windows? And this is something that really does get you. Your playhead is here, and you go to make this the active window, and you click to make it the active window, and what happens to your playhead? It jumps to a location that you don't want it to be. You know, so maybe my playhead wants to be there, and I got to make this an active window, and I click on it. I never use, never say never, I rarely use my mouse to select my windows. What's the order that we normally edit? Normally, we start in the project pane, the project window, with our footage. We bring it into the source monitor, we throw it into the timeline, and then we end up putting it and seeing it in our program window, and occasionally we go ahead and we modify it with the Effects tab. Well, being the shifty guy that I am, the Shift key is very useful. If I go Shift 1, my first step, active window, project. Shift 2, source. Shift 3, my sequence. Shift 4, my program monitor. Shift 5, my Effects tab. Makes a lot of sense, easy to remember. Shift 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 allow you to jump to each of those windows. Okay, so I'm going to jump to window 3. And I want to do an insert edit right here. And I could have jumped to 3 and used J, K, and L to position it. If I don't have an in or an out point marked, it will, of course, put the clip where the playhead is positioned. We learned that it will put the clip on the track that is targeted. I'm not going to tell you how to do this. You're going to have to research it. But you can even set keyboard shortcuts to target your tracks. Give you something to think about for the advanced class. I'm ready to go. J, K, and L, I, and O. Still haven't touched my mouse. I want to do an insert edit. Directly under J, K, and L are the comma key and the period key. Think of the comma as wedging something in. That's an insert edit. Think of the period as the full stop, and you're going to stop and just put something in. I'm going to go ahead, hit the comma key, boom. I have a problem. I told you I love problems. I not only have an in point and an out point in my source, it thinks I have an in point and an out point in my destination, which I do. So I said, it uses where the playhead is, and if you don't have an in or an out point marked, and silly me, I didn't realize I had an in or an out point marked. So if that is the situation, I could say, oh, ignore the in or ignore the out, because this only needs 3 points, but the truth is, I don't even want it to go there. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel. I need to remove my in and out point. We learn in I, out, O, there's an optional way to do that if I want to remove it. With that window selected, Shift 3, I go Option, I, removes my in point. Option O will remove my out point. Okay? I'm lazy. I just undid that. I want to remove them both at the same time. There's a keyboard to do that. But first, before I tell you what the keyboard to remove it is, I'm going to tell you the keyboard shortcut to mark a clip with an in and out point. Because I don't want to go to the beginning of that clip and mark an in, and the end of that point and mark an out. No, I'm a pirate. These may sound silly, but you will remember stuff this way. And when you're a pirate and you bury your treasure, how do you mark the spot? X. Right. If I hit X, it will mark an in and an out point above the clip where the playhead is parked. So X marks the spot, instantly do an in and an out point. If I want to remove that out point and in point simultaneously, once again, our friend the Option key, Option X will simultaneously remove the in point and the out point at the same time. One has to actually be able to hit the X key when looking. Option X. There we go. And I can remove it. So now I have the in and the out point marked on my top clip. I'm going to now jump up, and maybe I'll put it in between a clip. Look at that. I don't have to move my mouse with J, K, and L. The up and down key is going to jump me between all my edit points. I don't even have to worry about it. So the up and down key will jump you between edit points. Now, while we're doing that, do you notice that when I'm jumping, it's actually stopping also on track 2 on that edit point? And some of you are saying, why does it work for him, but it's not working for me? It's working for me because this is an active track, because that's turned on. If that is turned off, and I do up and down, it doesn't stop there. So that's something to keep in mind. If you want it to stop on that track, it needs to be active, or you need to have taken this course and learned the secret that if you hold down the Shift key, whether a track is active or not, when I use up and down, it will stop at every edit point, no matter what. It's really good to use the right direction when looking there. Come on, see? So the Shift key with up and down not only stops at the edit points on the main track or on the selected tracks, it will stop at every edit point along your sequence. This is actually a really good thing to do right before you export your show. I jump to every single edit point, because then I can discover if I have a flash frame of a gap or just a piece of a little clip hanging there, because I'll see it. I won't necessarily see it when I'm playing. So Shift, up and down arrow keys, very, very, very useful. So let's go down. I've marked my in and out points as a reminder, because it's been so long since I've done that. Marked an in, marked an out with J, K, L, and I and O. Now I'm going to go ahead, hit the insert key, which is the comma. I'm wedging it in, and I'm good to go. It put that right there exactly where I wanted it to be, and move the playhead. So I can actually go through all of this and not have to touch my mouse a lot. Now, there's some editors out there that says, if you touch your mouse, you're not an editor. They're very purist. I don't believe that. If my hand is on the mouse and it's faster, I'll use that. If the keyboard's there and that's faster, I'll do that. If you get a paycheck for editing something, you're an editor. And that's what I'm all about, getting a paycheck and being able to edit faster, because you say, well, it saves a little time. If you can save, let's say, a mere 12 minutes a day by using shortcuts. You're like, why did he pick 12 minutes? That's an hour a week. That's 50 hours a year, 52 technically. Okay, that's like a week of vacation by just using some keyboard shortcuts versus using that mouse. Okay, so try to use some of these. And I don't want you, this is what I don't want. I don't want you to sit here and watch the show and try to remember every single keyboard shortcut and every single trick that I'm teaching you. As you're working, you'll remember, he said something about navigating the timeline. And you'll go back and you'll watch that section of the show and you'll learn that. Don't try to remember it all and use it all at once. Learn it in chunks. Say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to learn 5 keyboard tricks today. And you know how I'm going to pick those 5 tricks? I have sat down, and when I've been editing the last couple days, every time I've done something with a mouse or a drop-down menu, I've made a check mark. And I'll look down and I say, wow, I have used that menu key 17 times to use the undo. I better learn that Command Z is undo. That's how I learn my keyboard shortcuts. Not some random thing that I may never use, but if I find that I keep right-clicking on something or going to a drop-down menu and there's a keyboard shortcut associated with it, then it's worth learning. So I want you to keep that in mind. So we can navigate to Shift 1, 2, 3, but I'm here on 2. What happens if I hit Shift 2 again? Oh, the clip changes, and it changes, and it changes. How is it doing this? What is it doing? Shift 2 will toggle me between every clip that I've loaded into my source monitor prior to this edit. That's really useful, because let's say, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to clear all this. Okay, there should be an option here that says close all. So now source has nothing. And I can go down here and say, you know what? I'm cutting between Colin and the dancer. And let's pick one more shot. And this beautiful underwater shot of me. I'm dragging them all into the source window. Boom. They're all there. What's a real world use of this? I'm cutting a scene. Wide shot, over the shoulder, maybe I have a close-up. Clean over the shoulder, dirty over the shoulder. And I can sit there and use Shift-2, and I can switch between. Oh, look, Colin became just an audio. There he is. And I can quickly shift between which scene I want to put in. I don't have to keep going down here and clicking. Okay, that's really useful. The other thing that's really useful, and I have to make something just to do it. No, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to go ahead and drag that, make a new sequence based upon that clip. Let's make a new sequence based upon that clip. So I'm in my Shift-3 window. Shift-3 multiple times will toggle me between my active sequence. So I have multiple sequences open. Which one do I want to go to? Shift-3. Very, very useful. So multiple taps actually allow you a lot of flexibility when navigating. So we did J, K, and L. We did I and O. There's a couple other ones that are really useful. Let me jump back here to this. If I'm working on this clip, if I double click on it, it loads that specific clip back into my viewer. Okay? And maybe I want to work on the effects control for that. But sometimes I just want to find that clip because maybe I'm doing this interview with Colin, and I know there's another soundbite that I want. So I don't necessarily want to load the clip that I'm working on by double clicking it into the viewer. I want to do what's called a match frame, which is load that same clip from my project file. So it's a match frame. The keyboard shortcut is F. I hit F, it loads the entire clip. And now, see, I have all these little markers for his little sound bites. I can move that and find exactly what I want, mark it in, mark it out, and bring that new clip in. So match frame allows you to bring the entire original clip into your source monitor, and then you can grab another piece of it. Really very useful. Let's see if this is actually, I have this in the metadata. No, I don't. What's interesting, if you look at this, and this is something cool that I just discovered literally like 2 weeks ago. And I think it's really cool, so I'm going to talk about it. I needed to transcribe this stuff and cut by the transcription, okay? So there's a new plugin that just came out literally last week, or maybe even this week, called Transcriptive. And what you do is you take a piece of video, whether it's on your timeline or a bunch of clips, and you select them. Transcriptive you buy, I think it's like $199. I don't know if there's a beta still out there. It sends it to a artificial intelligence transcription service. And there's actually 2 services. And you pay for those services, but like the first 1,000 minutes, 1,000 minutes is like free. And then it's like 7 cents a minute. And what it does is you send it, it goes up to the magical place in the cloud. It says, yes, you still have minutes left. If not, it says, give us a credit card, pay us 7 cents. And then it translates it, sends it back down, and then tags it and puts it against the clip. So now you can just type in what he was saying and jump right to that point. You can also export this as a Word file so you can read it and make basically a paper edit of a narration or an interview and cut things down very quickly. You can also use this. It's about 95% accurate, so you can go through and as a word processor, you can change, like Siri sometimes doesn't understand things. Alexa does. They argue with each other. But you can change it and use that as a captioning file, either closed or open. So this is something I had. The metadata is now attached to the clip, and I could literally just type in, I'm going to say, he's talking about, I guess he might say Mavic, which is the type of drone. Nope, he doesn't do that. Let's see if he says beach. Okay, so yeah, he's at the beach, and there it goes. The 2 parts to flying at the beach are when it comes to flying a drone at beaches, and then I go ahead and click on it, and it jumped and actually selected that section, and I could edit it in. Not native in Premiere, but this is so wickedly cool that I had to bring it up. It's called Transcriptive. I think the company is Digital Anarchy. And speaking of third-party plugins, just in general, Premiere can do a lot of great stuff. There are some amazing third-party plugins, and a lot of them are actually free. Because usually what they do is they give away some just to kind of get you to come to their site, and they're pretty good. And then they sell some, which is only normal, and the prices really have come down. If you go to and you Google Adobe Premiere plugins, you'll actually get to an Adobe page, which will list a lot of those plugin vendors. Some of the ones that jump to the top of my head that have free plugins as well as good paid ones are Digital Anarchy. Who else? FX Factory Pro has a lot of free ones. Red Giant, Boris, BCC, Sapphire. But just look at that stuff and download. And a lot of them, this is what I think is really nice. I'm a big fan of the plugin community because mostly they're like little guys. They're like one or two people, and they just write some great code, and it really takes these things to the next level. I completely lost my train of thought about how wonderful they are. No, they're great little guys. They all have free stuff. But pretty much every plugin, there's a free trial. It's either it works great perfectly for 15 days, and then it gets watermarked, or in some cases it is watermarked, but you can test to see if it solves your problem. So, check that out, because that in itself is a whole set of advanced tricks and techniques. Because sometimes with a third-party effect, you can do with one click what could take you 20 minutes, to create yourself. So that's a little bit of an aside, and it popped up because of that. That's why I seem to have a million markers there. But you kind of see how cool that can be, because I just marked my in and out point. I'm going to hit Shift 3. Come on, Shift 3. Take me to my window. Oh, I'm in there. Shift 3. Go to the end, function end. Hit the period key. I just put that soundbite in. Let's talk about some other useful things when editing, and we're editing an interview here. A lot of times I'll bring things into my sequence, and I'm not really precise on how I bring it in. I just kind of slug in a chunk, and I want to do my fine-tune edit within the sequence. And I use a lot of different techniques. The primary one is trimming. We talked about slipping and sliding. Those are two types of trim edits. But sometimes you just want to trim the head and the tail of the clip. And as I indicated earlier, some of this material I've covered in other classes, but there are some folks who are watching just this class, and I want to make sure that these valuable techniques are exposed to everybody. So I'm going to go ahead, and if I'm playing a clip, one of the things I can do, and one of the things a lot of people do, is they just kind of razor blade part of it and cut it out. And that works fine. If that is how you work, that's great. You might go over here, select the razor blade tool, keyboard shortcut C. You might go ahead, cut the clip out, switch to your selection tool, select it, delete it. You have that, delete it. A lot of steps, but it works. Well, let's progressively remove some of those steps, and you can progressively absorb what you want. So if I want to cut everything out here, and instead of going over and grabbing the razor blade tool, I can use the keyboard shortcut of Command K, as in cut, spelled wrong. That will razor blade a clip. Okay? I want you to see something. That was not highlighted, my audio. So it only razor bladed the tracks that are active tracks. So think of it this way. Everything to the left is when you bring something in. Every one of these things, when it's highlighted, affects what's already in the timeline. That's how you can think of track targeting. So it didn't cut the audio. I have two choices. I could go back and select it. I'm going to use the up arrow key to go there. Command K cuts whatever's active. Shift Command K cuts everything, whether it's active or not, on all of your tracks. If I go over here, where I put that, and I have something on this track, and this isn't even selected, Shift Command K for misspelling of cut, boom. I just put a razor blade between all of these tracks. Okay? So no need to go to the C key. Sometimes you'll cut something, Shift Command K, and I know right now, almost hit the mic, that is really a continuous edit. Okay, it's called a through edit. It means that when I play this, there's no hiccup there. Okay? And maybe I want to merge it back together. Well, if I want to know what are my through edits, I can go back to the wrench. And one of the things I can say is I can say show through edits. And while I'm here, I do want to point out you can also show duplicate frame markers, which is really nice if you are using a lot of footage in a documentary and you want to see if you've used the same clip twice. So let me go ahead. I'm going to turn both of those on, actually. Just so I'm not sure if I have any duplicates, but it's likely, yeah, I do, because of the way that I edit. So I can see right here, this part of Colin's clip and that part of Colin's clip, they've both been used twice. So it's a nice way to see if you have redundant information. If you have another clip that you've used twice, it's going to be a different color. Let's go ahead, Option drag that. See, that's a different color. So it's great if you want to see if you've used a whole clip twice, or sometimes it's just a little bit of an overlap. But the other thing that I turned on was show through edits. So now, whenever I have two clips next to each other that really are continuous time code, or they're continuous, I'll see this little bow tie, and I'll know that I really don't need a cut there. So what I can do is I can simply select that edit point and hit the delete key and glue them back together. Okay? So it's a nice thing. You turn this on and off as you need it. Some people just turn it on at one point in their edit, go through and reconnect all their through edits, and then they turn it back off again. But again, it's one of those things that we really never look at, but once you know it's there, you'll find valuable use for it. So back to where we were, where I was showing you how you might trim a clip and you cut it and then you select it. Yeah, I could put the cut there. I hit delete. There are ways, like on a Mac, Option delete will not only remove it, but also close the gap. Okay, it's called a ripple delete. I believe on Windows it is Shift. I have to look that up. I'm going to have a PDF, probably in about a week, because it'll take me a week to recover from just this 3 hours and those 19 cups of coffee. But I'll put both the Windows and the Mac keyboard shortcuts for those folks out there. And we'll get that to you as soon as possible for those people who buy the class. But I'm even too impatient to do it that way with Command K to cut and then select and then Shift delete. And by the way, if you want to select a clip, we talked about X marking the spot. That puts an in and out point. But if you hit the D key will actually select the clip that is below where the playhead is parked. See how that's highlighted? And it did not connect the audio because that wasn't turned on. I'll do that again now. The D key will select whatever clip is below it, which is great. It's now the active clip. What I really want to do is I want to trim some of this. And let's go ahead and focus a little bit more. I'm going to zoom in a little more detail. I'm going along and I'm playing. And I say to myself, I need to move everything to the left of where the playhead is. Okay? I want to cut it. I want to select it, I want to delete it, and I want to close the gap. And I want to do it with one key, Q. Upper left-hand corner of your keyboard. It will delete everything to the edit point. Now I see a through edit here, but that still's an edit. I want to just lop that off at the beginning. I threw down this soundbite. It was him just waiting, chit-chatting with me. I hit the Q key, boom. Cuts everything off at the beginning, closes the gap, and now I'm ready to trim off the end of the clip. Play to the end of the clip. Bum, 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 bum. He looks around. Yes, I crashed it a couple of times before he looks down. Next to the Q key is the W key. That will lop off the end of the clip. Boom. So you can go through a bunch of clips on your timeline. You just throw down interview bites, just with lots of extra handles. Q and W will trim off the head and the tail of that clip. Now, you want to make sure if you have like 40 minutes and you hit the W key at 1 minute, it will cut off the other 39 minutes. It will cut off until the next edit point. So just keep that in mind. There's also a variation on that. And let's see if I can do that here. First of all, let's see if that's a through edit. Nope, not anymore. So that's Q and W. You can do Shift Q and W. And let me make sure it's on the selected track. There we go. be good if we could see what we're doing. Shift will actually do a extend edit from the previous clip. So if this is parked here, and that's my active window, and I go ahead and I hit Shift Q, oh, not enough media on that clip. That would be the downside. It will actually do an extend edit. Believe me on that one? Believe me. You can believe me. I thought I threw a bunch of clips in here that I actually did not have to worry about, and I guess I've been adding stuff. Shift. There we go. You see, it extended that clip there. Instead of trimming it, it just kind of moves the edit point. And let's talk about that, because that's where we're getting into some of the other trimming points. If you have your regular selection tool, okay, the V key, you probably are aware that as you put it to the edge of a clip, you get this little red trimming tool, and this allows you to add or remove media from the clip in the timeline, as long as there is media. If you have the little triangle, false sunset, can't add anything, even if I had space, because there's no more media. Okay, we saw that earlier in the class. So that's a regular trim tool. The problem with the regular trim tool is I can go left and make space, but if I go right, I'm going to run into this wall here, and it won't let me trim it any longer. So what we want to do is switch to our ripple trim tool. And you can go down there, click and hold, and you can see ripple edit tools, which is the B key. And what the ripple tool is if I hold down the command key, or if I switch to the B key, and let's switch to the key, B as in bring with me. It's an example I've used before, and that is something I learned from a buddy of mine, Jeff Greenberg. It's great little keyboard memory, and I'm going to give him credit every time I use it. And when I hit the B key, you notice that that is now yellow. It is not red. And if I go ahead and I move this to the left, it trims it, and it closes the gap. Red will leave a gap, yellow will not. It brings the next clip with me. The other thing that it can do that's really nice is with the red trim tool, I couldn't go any further to the right because I run into the next clip. But with a ripple trim, I can move it to the right, and it just pushes everything downstream. So I tend to like to do that. Okay, that's the B key, and then I would switch back. If you find yourself doing this a lot, and I do, that this is the primary way that I trim, I don't want to even have to switch to the bring with me tool, the B key. I want it to be the default whenever I'm using my selection tool. And so I go up into my preferences. I'm going to go up into general, and I'm going to go specifically to trimming. And in trimming, there is an option that says allow the selection tool to choose roll and ripple trims without a modifier. So now, by default, and this caught me because I didn't have it set by default in my previous class when I was trying to teach a roll edit. Now, when I hover over, do you see that it already is the yellow key? It already is the ripple trim. And if I put it in the middle between two clips, it becomes the roll edit tool, and I can move that back and forth. I don't have to use a modifier key. I don't have to switch to the roll tool, which is an N key. I don't have to switch to the ripple tool, which is the B key for bring with me. It's there. If I do want to do a traditional trim, I can hold down the same modifier key that did it the other way, and now it goes back to the red one, and I can do an original trim, not a ripple trim. But to me, I am constantly ripple trimming, and so that is one preference that I like to change because it really speeds up my workflow. As we're moving through some of these trimming techniques, if I wanted to select the closest edit point, I can hit Shift-T, I believe that is. Selects the closest edit point. Once that is selected, the up and down key, by the way, will jump to the previous or next edit point with it selected. So if the closest one really isn't the one you want, you use the up and down arrow keys. And now I can start trimming with my keyboard. So for instance, and this is where sometimes the gibberish of keyboard shortcuts in my brain sometimes get a little bit tricky. That's not what I want to hit. So I'm holding down the Option key, and I'm actually doing a roll edit 1 frame at a time. Okay? If I did this by dragging it, you would see it up in the window, but I'm holding an Option or Alt, and I'm trimming this 1 frame at a time, and you don't see it that way. You just have to kind of know. The Shift modifier key lets you trim by many. Many is such a random number, isn't it? You know? How many millions of dollars would you like? I'd like many, okay? And hope that many means a larger number to them than to you. But if you hold Shift Option, it will move it by many. The default is 5, but if you were paying close attention as I opened the preferences for trimming, there is an option for, come on, zoom in, large trim offset. So many is 5 frames. But maybe, you know something? I'm impatient. I want to trim 30 frames at a time. Okay? That's good. I hit OK. Go back here. Shift Option. It's jumping a second at a time on these trims. Okay? That's a roll. What if I want to do a ripple trim? I don't want to touch my mouse again. I have it already selected. I want to control the trim. T for trim, Control for control. Control T will toggle me through, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see this, the different types of 5 trims, Control T. So I'm going to go here. It's now a ripple trim, Shift Option, left arrow. Jumping it by a second at a time. If I hit Control T, switch that to a red trim tool. Come on. Oh, I would have to hit Control and not Option. There we go. Now I'm doing a regular trim. Oh, with my keyboard. So these are really, really useful. These are great little trimming things to really finesse something. The final trim that I want to show you is called an extend edit. I'm playing along. I'm cutting to music, and right there is really where I need to make the edit. That's where the beat of the music is. And I could grab this and move it over, but I know this is already there. I've selected my edit point by simply hitting Shift T. Now I hit the Extend Edit keyboard shortcut. The Extend Edit keyboard shortcut, it's the letter E. It will now move that edit point. It will roll the edit point to wherever my play it is parked, as long as there's enough media. And that's pretty quick and it's pretty precise. Okay, so the Extend Edit is one of those things that I really like, especially sometimes, you know, if I have a whole series of clips, I can, you know, I want them all to end at that one point. I can do that. And my brain is telling me there is a way to do this. I'm trying to remember the keyboard shortcut. But there's a way that when you do your selection, you can select just edit points. That's backwards, forwards. That's my pin. That's my... I'm going to just see if I can do this. Let's see. Function selects the clips. Modifier key. This is how I learn stuff. I just keep mashing keys. Luckily, it happened the first time. I held down the Command key, which is probably the Control key on Windows. It allowed me to select multiple edit points as I lassoed them. Move my playhead, hit the E key. Well, it didn't move them all like the old nonlinear did. It just moved them all by the equal amount. Oh, that's because these are linked together, probably. That's weird. You always like when somebody's teaching you something, go, oh, I've never seen that before. Yeah, it is weird. I guess I threw everything off. Speaking of weird, let me show you some other things with this beautiful timeline that I bet everybody wants a copy of, because nothing works as good as this. But there are a lot of times, again, I have covered this, where you may want to unlink the video from the audio because you want to do something. In this case, let's just clean house a little bit. I think all of this is pretty distracting. Let's delete it all. So I have Colin talking here. Let's see if I can give this a color. Okay. And I want to do what's called a J-cut. In other words, I want the, assuming this is not a through edit, and this is how you pretend it's not a through edit. You go ahead and you uncheck through edits, and you pretend that I didn't teach you this. Where's the show through edits? I'm looking. It's probably right in front of me. No, not going to worry about that. But zoom back out, go over here. So normally when you grab the audio and video move together, okay? But a lot of times to make an edit smoother, you hear somebody talking before you cut to the next scene. Maybe it's an over the shoulder, maybe it's shot film style, and you want the audio to start before you want the video. This is great, by the way, if you're doing an interview, because in real life, and this is one of the tricks I use when cutting interviews, is, you know, I'll hear the person speak before I cut to their face. And you see this in TV all the time, in episodic television. It prepares you for the edit, and that way you don't notice the edit. You see this all the time on television. Sometimes you cut to a reaction shot while the first person's talking, because that's the whole point, and then you hear them speak. So you don't necessarily always cut at the moment that they speak, and that's why it's called the J and L cut, because it kind of makes the shape of the letter J or the shape of the letter L. So I really want to be able to break the connection here, and what a lot of people do is they'll select the clips, and they'll right-click, and they discover this great thing called linking, which I don't even know where it is anymore because I never use it. There we go, unlink. They unlink the clips. They can now go ahead and do a ripple edit there, and they're like, yeah, I'm good. And they keep editing. And then somehow later on they move this clip and they forgot to relink it, and now this is out of sync with that. Okay? And I would know that, by the way, if I turned on this preference, which should be all here, which says show out of sync stuff. I'm in the wrong, it's that panel right here. I don't know what's going on here with my brain. Brain is gone, but there should show out of sync. Oh, they moved that up to here, preferences, timeline. Out of sync indicators. There we go. It's showing me that that is 3 seconds out of sync. If these clips were still connected, it would have shown it anyway, but I disconnected it, and that's all a problem. Okay? So never unlink your clips. Undo, undo, we're back to where we are. Undo again, they are linked now. I just want to do a roll edit. I just want to affect the audio. If I hold down the Option key, it allows me, it's the Alt key on Windows, it allows me to select just the audio or video. One way you might use it is just to select this audio and delete it. Okay, maybe you have audio with a video clip, you just don't want the audio. Instead of going unlink and deleting it, Option, and it does it. I want to do something else. I want to do a roll edit. But if I hold down Option before I select the edit point, I can do the roll edit right there to this marker. Okay? As soon as I let go of the Option key, these clips are linked back together. So if I move this top clip, it's not going to go out of sync. I do not need to remember to relink the media. Okay? So never unlink. Hold down the Option key, and then do what you need to do, and as soon as you let up the Option key, everything is back to the way it's supposed to be. It's a great little shortcut that will save your bacon. Okay? Any questions coming in as we are talking? Are they they're typing so fast, their keyboards are on fire?
You know, I think you mentioned this, but maybe you could just clarify. Judy B wanted to know how you can do ripple edits frame by frame.
Yes, so I will repeat that because I do go rather quickly. So let's go back here. I'm going to actually bring this all together again. So let's say I want to do a ripple edit. I select the clip. Now I selected it manually by clicking on it. When I showed it before, I did it all with keyboards by hitting Shift-T and Control-key to select it. But once it's selected, you need to hold down a modifier key, Alt or Option, and then the left and right arrow keys on your keyboard will trim it one frame at a time. And Shift and Option, or Shift and Alt, will move it many, which I reset to 1 second. Okay? And because I have the ripple selected, of course, it's bringing the clip with me. It's the same as the B key. So that's very useful. If I have a clip selected, okay, Oops. Do that oops a lot these days. Zoom back out, move that to the right. I can also do a nudge, okay? Instead of holding Option, I'm holding down the Command key, okay? Which is usually Control on a Windows. Now, when I'm using the left and right arrow keys, it's moving this clip 1 frame at a time. When I hit another clip, it won't let me move it any further, but I can nudge it 1 frame at a time with the command. Shift command, again, Shift will do many. It'll do whatever that trim default is. So now I'm nudging it 1 second at a time. So that's actually pretty good. And speaking of moving things by very precise amounts, in general, we move things by 1 frame at a time in video. Whether that's 24 frames a second, or 30 frames a second, or 25 frames a second, every time you hit that left or right arrow key, you're moving it 1 frame. And you can see that specifically when you look at the counter there. Actually, our counter is on this side. Okay, we have 1 frame at a time. Sometimes you want to edit audio, and you want to edit audio at a much finer resolution. And you can do that in Premiere. You can actually get it down to the sample rate of the audio clip. So if you want to do that, it's great, but there's a potential gotcha. As long as you know what it is, it won't hit you. So I can go down. There's a couple places you can get this, but conveniently, I'm going here just because it's close to my timeline. So I go to the wrench, and I'm going to tell it that I want to work. I'm sure it's here in audio time units. I want to deal with audio, and I click it. And take a look at what just happened here. What was 2 digits is now 10,000 digits, okay? 1 sample frame for audio. And I actually, to get people nauseous, I'll do that. Now, when I move left and right, I'm moving 1/10,000th of a second, which gives me some pretty precise audio if I want to get out that or whatever, okay? Where you get into trouble is people accidentally switch to audio time units, and then for some reason, they don't know why, when they're moving thing a frame at a time, it's really not going very far. And you have to hit that button 10,000 times, okay, to go 1 second. If you hold the Shift key, you only have to do it 100 times, because the many for this is 100. But that still's a lot. So what it allows you to do is get very precise audio. This is the giveaway right there, because those are the units. And then when you're ready to trim something other than audio, you will go back. You will uncheck audio time units. And now you are working back in frames. So again, that's another nice trimming thing. It's really meant for audio. You can't trim a frame of video by a 10,000th of a second. It's a frame or it's not a frame. But audio is much more linear. Normally when you double click on a bin, one of 3 things happen, depending on if you're holding a modifier key. It either opens it up as an ugly floating window, at which point you curse. You can hold down the Command key, and it will open it in place, so it actually replaces the bin that you were in. It just kind of steps into it, and you can step back out of it with this button. Or if you hold down the Option or Alt key, it opens it up as a separate tab. But the real killer is when you double click on it and it just opens up this ugly floating bin. So if you watch some of the other classes I've taught, you've probably learned this. But this isn't a bad refresher. And for those who are new to the game, if you go to your preferences under General, the default is open in a new window, which I hate. I don't want to always hold down a modifier, so you can choose whichever one works for you. I'm just doing open in place. So now I can just double click, be lazy, and it steps into the bin. So of course, with the bins, by the way, you can look at them in 2 different views. You can look at them in an icon view, or you can look at them in a list view. Or you can look at them in an icon view, or a list view, if you're really good at moving your mouse. Or you could hold the Shift key and use the / key, which is under Delete and above Return, and that will toggle you between a list view and an icon view, which is really, really very nice. So that way I can see what all of my images are. Or if I want to look for something based upon the type of image or the metadata, I can switch back and forth. And of course, you can sort things. It's easy to sort things in this view because you just click on whatever element you want, and it sorts by that name or that time, and you're good to go. And actually, you can right-click and get into the metadata and add and remove things you might not need. So I can go there and I can say, you know what? I don't need the audio info because these are all silent clips. But wouldn't it be great if I knew exactly what the frame size was, which I probably have here anyway? Hit OK. So the pictures, so they tell me how big they are. So there, I'm going to move that over here. So that's very convenient. If I am shifting and backslashing and going to this view, I can still organize this. Because right down here is a little widget. And I can say, you know what? Organize this based upon if I've used it or not. Do it by its name. Do it by, its duration. These are all 5 seconds, so they're stills. But I can organize this however I want. And the trick is this little switch right there. So I'm going to go ahead and drag a couple of these clips in. They're selected. I'll just go ahead and hit the overwrite key, period. They all came into the timeline 5 seconds in length. I have all of these. And again, we learned this earlier. Let's get rid of Colin. These pictures are all different sizes, right? If I look back at here, they're just photographs. And if I look at the list, some of these are, where's my sizes? I moved it over. Some of these are 5,000 by 3,000, 7,000 by 5,000 panoramas. Some of these are huge. Some of them are little, okay? My little Simpson thing of me. But when they come in, it's all a 1-for-1, okay? So what I can do, as we learned before, I can right-click, select them all, right-click, and I go set to frame size. And now all of them will be scaled to the point that I see the entire image. So if the aspect ratio is not 16:9, which is the normal television aspect ratio, you'll see black bars in the top, letterboxing, so I see the whole image, or you'll see pillar boxing, which is black bars on the side, because most 35mm frame sizes are 4:3 or 3:2. But this way I can see the whole thing, and if I wanted to, I can go ahead, click on this, go to my effects control panel, make sure that it's selected. I had all of them selected, so nothing came up. And I can scale this up a little bit so it touches the edge. Okay? And if I want, I can also reposition that. I'll click the little icon there, bring that up a little bit, and life is good. Okay? So I can go ahead and do that. That's how I would probably work with a lot of images. Lighting effects. People don't know lighting effects are in here. You don't have to buy a third-party plugin. Take this thing, I can double-click it, I'm going to throw it on this clip. I now have the option to put a different type of light on it. I could put a spotlight, so here's my lighting effects, show it to you right there. Light number 1, it's a spotlight. I can actually move where that spotlight is. So if I click on the come on, don't want that button there. Change some of the elements. Oh, too much, Abba. Too much. There we go. Let's go ahead. I actually want to get where that light is. I need to go a little bit smaller. Smaller, by the way, is the other way. So there's my light. I think I can make this a little bit bigger for you guys in the back row of the class. So I'm going to go ahead and I can move that. I'm just kind of throwing a light there. I have different kind of lights. It could be a directional, an omni, a spotlight. I'm going to give it a little bit of color. Let's make it a little bit of that gold, orange gold. Okay. Come on. I said okay. You do it. Boom. It's just being difficult. It's the end of the day. Let's see if I can pick a color. Don't know, it took that time. So I have this great little effect. I can animate it and sweep it over. But I just wanted to have an effect on a clip because I want you to see something. I can replace this clip with something called a replace edit by simply dragging another image onto it. So I could go ahead and I could drag this wine image. I drag it on top. I let go. It replaces the clip. But if I drag, and it just replaced it. You know, it's like a perfect replace edit. But if I drag it on top and I hold down, I believe it's the Option key, and let go, what it does is it replaces the clip, but it keeps all of the effects from the original clip and puts it on the new clip. So basically, and that's really pretty slick. You want to switch out a shot, but you don't want to deal with like copying and pasting all the effects that you did on the first shot. You can simply drag it, hold down the Option key, let go on top of the other clip, and you've done a replace edit and kept all the original effects. That's, again, one of the really, really cool features that nobody really talks about, except in dark bars of nerds who teach Premiere Pro. There's a couple different ways that you can remove clips. I'm going to go ahead and close this space. So if I select a clip, and I just put the playhead over the clip and I hit the delete key, we saw we can remove any clip that's selected. I'm going to hit undo. If I hold the modifier, and it's different for Windows and Mac, I think it's Option Delete on a Mac or Command, oh, I've got to have select that, Option Delete. It removes it and ripples and closes the space. Okay. So that's, we've learned. But there is something also called a lift edit and an extract edit, and it doesn't work with clip selection. It works with marking of in and out points. Okay, so if I mark an in and out point, and this can be within the body of a clip, or this can actually be a row of multiple clips. And the extract and the lift tools are on your keyboard next to J, K, and L. They're the semicolon and the apostrophe. So I'm pretty sure these are the ones. If I hit the apostrophe, it removes everything between the in and the out point and closes the space. That's an extract edit. If I use the semicolon key, it removes everything between the in and the out point, but leaves the gap. Okay? And that's how it works. Now, what's interesting is when you do an extract, and if you look at the screen, it actually saves what you extracted in the clipboard. So if I do an extract, I can go ahead to another part of my timeline and hit Command-V and paste back everything I removed. So I may want to move a big chunk from here, mark an in point, to here, mark an out point. Okay? I want to extract it because I don't want to leave a space. Boom. But I want to go ahead and I want to put it here at the end of my timeline. It's still being held in the mysterious world of the clipboard. Command-V paste, and now I've pasted them to another part of my timeline. That is a lot easier than grabbing them, dragging them up to another track, dragging them down, figuring out where you want them later. Okay? Lift edits and extract edits. Very, very powerful tools. And it works with in and out points, not with selecting a clip. If you select a clip and try it, basically it's just like hitting a key that doesn't do anything. Let's see what other little tricks that are useful. This is actually something that, again, a lot of people don't go into. I'm going to go back and make this fit into the window. It's, again, we peeked into this briefly. It's this little wrench here, and this allows me to do a couple of things. First of all, if you do not like these buttons at all, you can go here, and if you want more real estate, you can just go ahead and uncheck. That's really what I need to cut. So you notice, thank you very much. As now they're not there, gives me some extra real estate. There are more transport controls available to you than meet the eye. If I hit this little plus key to the right, I will see all these different options. These are the default layout, but if I want, I could go ahead and add some things. I could go ahead and drag this down, That's going to let me go ahead and turn on and off closed captioning so I can access that to start typing things in instead of worrying about a menu drop-down or a keyboard shortcut. Okay? If I find I don't use some of these, like the play key, because I'm using J, K, and L, I can pull those out. And maybe I want to grab this one so I can switch between a regular view and the multicam. So I want to look at multicam view. So I find that one useful. And this one, there's two other ones that I really like. One is toggle proxies. We haven't talked a lot about proxies. One of the new features in Premiere that came out, I think, a couple iterations ago is when you ingest, if you have really large files, and I'll show you how to do this after I create this, you have the option for Premiere to make lower resolution or lower bandwidth or even physically smaller frame size proxy versions of your video. So if you're using 4K or 5K or RED files that really will tax your system, you can create nice H.264 smaller proxies, edit with those, and then when you're done, click a button and switch back to the full resolution for when you output. So I'll show you how to do that in a moment, but there's a little button here that I can bring in that basically allows you to toggle between using the proxy files that it creates and using the original files. So that's one of the ones I find very useful. And then the other one is it this one? Yes. It's called Global FX Mute, which basically means I want to turn off all of my effects and see what it looks like without it, but I don't want to necessarily disable them. Okay? So I want to delete them, I should say. So I hit OK, and let's see if I can work that. I think I still have an effect on that one image here. And there you see, I can actually toggle on and off the video effects. I could do this for many reasons. Maybe I don't want to see it with the effect. Maybe I just want to get a rhythm of my show, and I don't care about all the color correction and effects I threw on it. So I want to just be able to toggle off all of those effects. So those are some really cool ways that you can modify this area, okay, to make it more functional, more useful for you. I want to show you one more area in here, and then I'm going to jump back and I'm going to address that proxy workflow and see if there's any other questions as we start rolling towards the end. But when I go under this wrench, there's a couple other things that I might use, and the key ones I want to really talk about is overlays and overlay settings. So overlay will actually turn on and off the overlays, and what it does is, depending on how you have your overlay settings configured, it will give you information about your clips. Now right now, my default settings, or the ones I have here, will just show me the time code for all my audio and video tracks. Okay? But I could go down here and under overlay settings custom, so that's the V1 track, but I'm going to go here to settings to make a custom, and I can say, you know what? It's really important for me on the top to know the name of the clip, okay? The project clip, in other words, the original clip. So I'm going to turn that on, and I can talk about, okay, do I want to know the name of all of the clips that I might be seeing on every track, or maybe I just care what's on the main track, V1. Okay? Or do I want to care about some other track? So I can do that with both video and audio. And where would I like to actually see this? So we'll put the clip name on top. On the right side, maybe it's important for me to kind of just know a file name. And I want to know the file name of all tracks. And then maybe I wanted to see what markers are there and what those markers say. I can go ahead and do that, and then I can even, if I want to, I can put on what's called title safe. Hopefully you are familiar with title safe from the previous classes. It's basically, if you show something on a television set, you need to be careful of the very edges because sometimes they are not seen, so you don't put critical information or critical graphics there. There's also an option here to do 4:3 safe. So if somebody is watching this on an old 4:3 television, you can actually see where it would be cut off, okay? If they broadcasted full screen and you lose the left and right side. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hit OK, and there we see a lot of our information. I see the clip names for all the clips that are on here, and I have more information than I need. I actually did that twice. There's my time code, and if I want to turn on my grids, I turn on safe margins. Now I can see action safe and title safe. And because I turned it on, I can see the 4x3 action safe and 4x3 title safe. So when I'm starting to lay graphics down or trying to figure out, where the important stuff needs to be, and this was huge when we were transitioning into high def. A lot of the shows that were shot and edited in high def, the editors never put anything important around the outer edges. The logos would always sit here because they knew that most of the population were still watching it on 4x3 televisions 10 years ago, but they wanted to be able to show them today in the full widescreen glory. So that's one of the reasons we have that. Right now it's visually annoying for me, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the overlays and turn off the safe margins. One last thing I want to turn on here before we move to the proxy workflow is there's something here called Show Drop Frame Indicator. And you'll notice that we have some colors here, yellow and red. And the way Premiere works is that if something is yellow, it's just saying it's using the computer processor. There's probably an effect on there or a scaling on there, but it will play without dropping frames. The computer is fast enough, okay? And being that this is a still image, it's not really that hard. When you put some effects on something and it's red, you may or may not drop some frames on playback. Ultimately, when you export it or render it and you create those preview files, you won't drop any frames because all the math is done. But this would tell you if you drop any frames. And you see right now, and it won't, I have a little green dot. That says, as long as it stays green, during playback, I haven't dropped any frames. But if it turns yellow or turns red, and I don't think I'm going to get this on Colin either, unless maybe, V key, I copy that and I paste the attributes of this effect, but it didn't grab the effect. I do have the effect on there, don't I? Global effect. Did I turn all my global effects off? What's on and what's off? Who knows? OK, I think that's on. Copy effect, Command Option V. Yeah, lighting effect, boom. So I'm going to go ahead and play this with this wonderful lighting that I have going on here. Might be too much math for it to calculate. OK, you saw that went from green to yellow? That says I've dropped frames. Now, you can see I'm dropping frames. It's really struggling because, to tell you the truth, that lighting effect is actually a really old effect, and it's not taking advantage of the graphics card. So it's really using old code. There's probably newer stuff out there. But if I hover my mouse over there, I can see how many frames were dropped. So what I might say to myself is, oh, I'm seeing dropped frames. I'll render this one little section before I show it to my producer so it doesn't stutter. That's really what it's all about. It's just a little bit of feedback. I'm going to switch over and talk a little bit about the proxy and the ingest. And you can do this when you generate or create a new project. You can also do this in process while you're working on a project. So you can find this in a couple of locations. If I go up here under Project Settings, okay, which is the same thing you'll hit when you say Make New Project, you get this dialog box. And we saw this briefly. If I go to Ingest Settings, I have an option. I'll turn this on. And this will work for everything you ingest, of course, after you turn this on. If I want, I can just have it copy the files. And copy is really useful if you're using any kind of a camera card. So by default, and I try to impress upon people the importance of this in every class, when you're working with a camera card, copy the card off to the hard drive before you hit the import key, because Premiere does not move the media. Okay? It leaves it where it is. You eject that card, your camera media goes offline, you erase the card, it is gone forever. But if you turn this on in Ingest Settings and have Copy turned on, it will actually copy all the media, and you can tell it where it's going to copy that media to. The default is the same as the project, but you could choose a specific media location. You have a couple of options here. Basically, you can do a checksum to make sure that as it's copying, it's verifying that everything is actually coming across. Sometimes if you just grab it and move it via the Finder or Explorer, if the machine crashes halfway through, it doesn't know if it's copied everything or not. So this is basically, it's called a checksum. It's validating the fact that you're being successful and there's no hiccups when it copies stuff. And that's just moving things from its location. You can also do this if it's on an external hard drive, okay? So that's some of the options for copy. You can transcode media, okay? So maybe you want everything to be a certain format. You want it all to be Apple ProRes because you have a slower machine and you don't want it to be a highly compressed flavor. And you can go ahead and you can change that, okay? You can also create ingest presets in Adobe Media Encoder and bring those in if you have something very specific. The third option, and then the fourth option, I'm going to actually cover these both together, is to create proxies. So what this will do is when you're ingesting it, it is taking the media, it's not copying it because we didn't do copy and create proxies, just create proxies now, and it is going to transcode them to another flavor, usually a smaller frame size and a less demanding codec. It has a bunch of defaults. I actually create my own extra one because the one I like doesn't exist. So these are all different flavors. And by the way, if you're on Windows, you will not see ProRes as an option. Macs can make ProRes because Apple invented ProRes and has not licensed it to the Windows machine. But you'll probably use Cineform, which is pretty equivalent to that. There's a couple new ones coming out, or H.264. These are just lower stress on your computer codecs. And then these are smaller sizes. So this, they picked this because this was a variation of 960, that's 1920. I don't know how they got some of these. I do know how they got some of these. But what I like, because I'm using sometimes 4K footage, I'm using ultra high definition, which is 3840 by 2160, 4 times the resolution of high def. I like to actually have my proxy to be 1920 by 1080. So it's still the same exact format. If I needed to throw it into a 1920 by 1080 timeline, I'm good. So I did make that in Adobe Media Encoder, which comes with Premiere. It's one of the apps you get when you get the suite. And I save that, and I add that as an ingest preset. You can do whatever flavor you want. You can do some reading on this, but this is really nice. So this converts it. And the other option is you can also create proxies and copy the original media if it happens to be on a card or another drive and you want it local. So once you've done that, you can start editing, and you can toggle back and forth between that little button you created or a keyboard shortcut or a menu dropdown between using the original media, which is maybe harder for your computer to process or harder for your hard drives to push through the pipe. And you could say just use the proxies. And then when you're ready to put a high quality output, or you want to just check the nuances of, do I have really clear image? Do I have any artifacts? How's the color correction working? You could just toggle to the full high resolution stuff. And then of course, you can choose where all of these land. When you have this checked, okay, and you import something, as the moment you import, you'll actually see Adobe Media Encoder launch, and it's going to be creating those proxies in the background. So it'll just use whatever cycles of the CPU that are not being used, and in the background we'll create your proxies, and eventually you'll have all your proxies. But there is some time to create that, and that is how it works. If I created a new project, I would see that same dialog box. Now that you know where to look for it. And if I go into my preferences, I believe there should be one for ingest settings. I could be making this up in my head, but I think it's under capture. Could be making this up in my head, but I thought this was one of the places. But you can definitely get it from project settings and when you create a new project. So if I go ahead and say I want a new project, file, new project. It's going to make sure I save this old one. You get this dialog box right over there on the right, ingest settings, boom. Once you set it, it tends to remember the last set of settings you have, which means that if you set it and you forgot it's there and then you go to ingest a big folder of things and suddenly Adobe Media Encoder pops up, you're like, facepalm. It's like, no, 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 that was for the last application. I don't need it for this one. I need to go ahead and open up my Premiere project file again. And so, yeah, masking is something that almost every single effect has the ability to create a mask. So if I go ahead, and there's a couple ways that people would use the mask, that's why I kind of wanted a clarification. But if I go ahead and throw an effect, say I throw an effect on Colin, and I'm going to just do a blur, and I'll do a Gaussian blur, and I'll throw it on here. Did I actually get the Gaussian blur on there? No, I did not. Double click, there we go. Gaussian blur, and I will make this blurry. Okay, what it looks like when I wake up in the morning. Get the cat hair out of my eyes. By the way, I've mentioned this in the previous class, but I want everybody to know this because it's useful. When you blur something, you'll sometimes notice, and oh, it's not happening here because this is not scaled down. I'm tricking myself here. Let's make sure this is set to frame size. There we go. When you blur something, the edges get really dark because it's actually blurring the black that's off screen. So if you do use blurriness or the Gaussian blur, go ahead and check the repeat edge pixel button. We covered that in the 6-hour class. May have not in the boot camp, but boom, there we go. So now it's nice and pretty there. And I want to create a mask where Colin is, so that the background is blurred. I'm just going to do a general shape mask. I'm not going to actually do something where I'm drawing an edge around him. So with every effect, you'll see these 3 icons. I know this might be surprising. This one makes a circle or an oval. This one makes a square. And this one lets you draw a shape. So I'm going to go ahead, create a circle, move it in the middle. So what I'm doing here is the mask is showing just the effect, just the blurry part, okay? Come on. Down, 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 down. And done, okay? So there's my mask. Let me expand it a little bit. Be good, mouse. See, it still thinks I'm touching the mask. These new touch, here we go. I never like to answer mask questions because that means I need to have my mouse and need to know how to use a trackpad. There we go, I think. There we go, I think I'm good. So once I make that shape, I can go ahead and, if I want to, I can invert it. So now the mask is on everything else but that one area. I can, if I need to, expand it a little bit. Here, we'll invert that again. If I want to, I can put a nice little soft edge on it. Okay, so there I have a mask, everything else is blurred. And maybe what I want to do is, maybe I don't want it to be so extreme. I'm going to take that blurriness down to just, a light level, maybe something like that. And so now I'm pretty sloppy, but maybe I'll do a little more of a blur. But my eye is drawn to the sharpest area of my image. So I have that mask shape. Now, if I wanted to, I could even copy that mask, because you can have multiple masks. I can select it and go copy, and if I wanted to, I could paste that mask on this clip. Okay, so now that mask is masking in or masking out my lighting effect. Okay, so I can use masks and multiple masks to control any effect. It's really useful for when you're doing color correction. If you want to isolate somebody's face, we saw that in the color correction class, that you can, there's masks within it for secondary, but sometimes you may change the color of a person's, maybe a flower, a red flower in the field and make it green, but there's green, yellow, better than green, make it yellow, but you want all the other flowers to stay red. So you do that mask with the luminance, the hue, saturation, luminance, and then you do a shape mask to isolate that one flower. So all the other flowers don't change, just the one inside of that shape. So you can create masks with any of these, and just to show you the options here. Oh, look, that's me. I could go ahead, and I wonder if I should have a mask on opacity. Yeah, we could bring that down, and then if I wanted to draw something, I should be able to draw a mask. Why doesn't it want to draw? It doesn't want to draw because it's 4 o'clock, and I probably put a bad filter on it. But is there another question as we move forward, or should I continue with masks?
Let me see.
I'll be talking long after the cameras stop rolling.
This is a question from Max. I just wanted a clarification on how should you name proxies when you were showing your proxy workflow? Any tips on naming them?
The names will, they'll be put in a separate location. The thing is, you shouldn't change the name of the proxies after you've created them, because then Premiere may not be able to find them. Okay? It's looking for the proxies generally with a specific name and specific parameters in a specific location. Now, if you do move them, which does happen, because maybe you've created them locally and want to move them on external and vice versa, when you switch to proxies, you'll see media offline, and you'll have the option to locate those proxies the exact same way that you would locate any media that goes offline because you've relocated it. But I would not change the name of the proxies from what it creates, because it's easier for it to switch back and forth. So something you've seen me do throughout the class is whenever I wanted to zoom in on any of these windows, I've hit the tilde key. And the tilde key will make whatever window the mouse is over full screen and toggle it back. Very useful, and I've been doing that all day. But there's 2 variations of that. One variation is if I have this one selected because I never touch my mouse, but my mouse is hovering down here somewhere, if I hit tilde, it's not going to make that one bigger, okay? It's going to make this one bigger. But if I have one selected, and we're going to use the Shift key to do that, Shift 2, okay? That's why it's supposed to be called the effects window, Shift 5, okay? Silly me, I picked up something that doesn't, we'll make it to 1 again, Shift 1, something in that window. Instead of hitting tilde, because my mouse is over here, I hit Shift tilde, and the selected window with the blue square around it is the one that gets bigger and smaller. So that's part 1, cool, cooler. This is coolest. You want to show the client your final show, you put it over this window, and you go ahead and you hit tilde, and you play it, and your client's saying, I love the show, but what the heck is this stuff? Because, of course, they have the attention span of a gnat, right? So instead of hitting the tilde key, hit Control tilde. It goes full screen without any distractions, just like they're watching it in a movie theater, and you're good to go. So that's my big finish. Control tilde lets it go full screen without any distractions.